Hello and welcome to Conversations on Kotoku. Welcome to Conversations on Kotoku. Kotoku is the hustler's pouch and it's where Ghana's way of celebrating and elevating African entrepreneurs, because as a brand we believe that it is entrepreneurship that will transform this great continent of ours. It is my pleasure to sit today and have a conversation with Priscilla. Priscilla is the creative lead for the Kor.Le.Kour brand, which is an accessories brand that is sustainable and which uses recycled material to create fashionable jewelry. Priscilla, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
How do you introduce yourself?
Let me see. So, for starters, my new title is I'm a mom to a naughty 4-year-old. And I'm a creative entrepreneur, I'm a visionary, and I'm a sustainability champion. So that's my main identity for myself and for my brand at the moment.
Right, and you are an alumnus of the Ghana Climate Innovation Center.
Yes, so they are a hub which is mainly focused on green companies. So they are into coaching and mentoring and providing funding as well for green brands, so agriculture, technology, and in my case, I think I was pretty lucky to be in that cohort for fashion, because sometimes fashion is not really seen as green, it's rather seen as the cause.
Fashion is quite the culprit.
Exactly, so yes. Fashion is quite the culprit sometimes. So yes, I was in the cohort 5, GCIC.
Which makes your brand truly remarkable. How did this all start? Did you always know that you were an entrepreneur?
I think for me, I always had a creative edge, but not really entrepreneurship. But along the way, I started to read around and I realized that once you have a budding hobby, it's connected to your passion. And I read somewhere that that passion should move into your side business or side hustle, see how it goes, see the flow, and then turn it into your business. So in a way, that's how I veered out of corporate and started my business.
Which is interesting as a formula, because people tend to ask, and I'm sure you get that question a lot too, I have this side hustle, how do I know when it's the right time to jump and make it a full-time thing? Yeah. So what you're saying is your advice is to do what exactly? Like how do you know when it is time to jump?
I think for starters, your sixth sense will tell you exactly when to jump, one, but you should also be cautious and make sure you've grown the side hustle properly to a stage where you will not financially be stranded. Because I like to advise people now that you should consider your lifestyle and the advantages or disadvantages you have as an individual before jumping full-time, especially if you're corporate, before jumping full-time into being an entrepreneur, because there's a roller coaster on that street, but we make it look cute.
Yeah, and I think I read you say somewhere to actually, I think what you did was to intentionally take lower paying jobs.
Exactly, yes.
So you actually transitioned. Tell us about this journey.
Okay, so I had a fantastic corporate job, high heels and a big office, and you know the cute look of having a corporate job. But it got to a point where I knew I wasn't passionate about just going to work.
Right.
I was literally irritated at the thought of going to work. So I got an opportunity to work with a foreign unicorn type of business. They were multinational, but they were also a startup. And I had the opportunity to work as a social media manager. So in my head, I knew at some point I'll transition out of corporate. So I took literally a half pay cut to take that job, which was totally crazy. I took a pay cut to take that job. Then after a while, I figured out what I wanted to learn from there. I took another job in marketing. That was BTL, like below the line type of marketing. And within, I think, 6 months to about a year into that job, I was confident enough that I had learned good information. I'd learned the ropes even from the corporate side, and was confident enough to start my own business, which I had been growing as a side business for, I think at that point, probably for 2 years at that point, yeah.
Right. How do you think, as people who lead teams, who might have entrepreneurs like who you were, an entrepreneur within the team that's looking to learn and go and build their own thing, what are some of the things you've come to realize we need to have as part of the corporate culture and deliberately create an environment for those types of people? Do you think that we should even employ entrepreneurial people?
I think it depends on the type of company. If it's flexible enough. But to be honest, my boss at that time, he was a Canadian, Mr. John Thompson. He would, during my leave, he would ask me, what do you do for your leave? I would go like, oh, I'm studying. I studied industrial art in tech. But I didn't study bead making. This is bead making. I studied jewelry making. So I was like, oh, I have this idea. I want to do it. I do it as a hobby. I was like, oh, that man actually encouraged me to, like, you know, take a class. Another friend of mine also encouraged. He even got me the school to go and study at Medina. So during my leave, when I was working corporate, I would go there and like I would study. So if you're lucky to have a boss who will encourage you, great, but to be honest, in our climate, it's not common to find such situations. I was probably one of the lucky ones to have. So I don't think it's really going to be a realistic thing to have corporate institutions push their teams to look into the entrepreneurial journey, because sometimes they actually penalize you for that.
But we lead the teams. So having had that experience of a boss who encouraged you, what are some of the things that you would do for your team members that you realize have entrepreneurial ambitions?
So for me, I've worked with a few startup businesses as an employee, and I didn't really like the experience. So what I tend to do is I don't put people on permanent base. I don't employ people permanently. I like to work with people on a freelance and retainer basis. So we work on projects, not on salary base, because what I realized was when there's a salary tied to it, the behavior is different. The behavior of the employer and the employee are very different. But if it's a retainer type of business, I know I'm paying you for this service and you're delivering, and you also know you got this job or this, what we call this gig for me. So it's you're more intentional about how you do it. But what I do for my team is I always put them on coaching. If I know probably I work with a social media lady. She's currently in university. Okay. She's difficult to work with, but I'm like, I wish when I was in university, somebody pinpoint or took me out and said, I will help you understand the world of work before you finish school. So I'm like, no matter how troublesome you are, I always try to, advise her, put her on trainings if I know of something. My production team, I always let them know that some of these products are going internationally. You have to meet certain standards. You have to have a certain look, use better material. So I do coach them as I would have loved to be coached, but I make sure that I don't put myself in the situation where my hands are tied. Because as an entrepreneur on this side of the street, like I'm saying, sometimes you are too stretched. Sometimes you are too stretched. So you have to make sure that you're not thinning yourself. You're not spreading yourself too thin, and that you can still give to yourself and still give to your team. So for me, I like to coach them and give them opportunities when I get into contact with such things, but not necessarily put them on permanent basis where I have a bigger responsibility of finding certain resources when they are not available.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk about sustainability. It's become such a trend, but you, having done Kor.Le.Kour, know that Africa and Krobo, to be specific, was sustainable a very long time ago. Exactly. Tell us the story of sustainability.
So for me, when I started my business, the original idea was to use 70% of raw materials from Ghana And in my head, I was like, these beads are made from Odumase Krobo. I'm Krobo. I've always had them as a child. So if I'm going to make jewelry, why do I want to use imported jewelry? Imported beads to make this jewelry? So once I was able to, leave corporate, I had time to travel, go to the villages. That's when I started noticing that these beads are made from glass. I was like, joking. I was like, no, this is how they've been doing it for centuries, and that the art of bead making is passed down from the male family line, and so the men are into production and the women are into retail.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and that's how that's their business model. That's how it works.
That's interesting.
Exactly. So once I started spending more time with these production, like with my production team, that's when I realized that it's made from glass. So I was like, okay, why can't I source glass from my customers here in Accra and then transport it to my bead producers in Odumase Krobo, and they will turn it into beads. So that's how come I veered into sustainability. It wasn't the original idea, but it was something that, it was an observation I saw during my tour and during my works with other bead producers. So that's how that story came about.
Right. How does Krobo feel about you?
I don't think they know me yet.
But I'm pretty sure a number of them know about you and the brand and the work that you're doing to put it out.
Probably.
There.
I think one thing about social media is sometimes we think social media gets everywhere, but in reality it doesn't, because some of these places don't have electricity.
Right.
Some of them don't have enough credit to be checking on Instagram too long to be seeing, what you are doing.
Right.
So I hope in the future I'll be able to have like proper activations. I'll say activations, proper activations, proper impact in the larger community, because I kid you not, on the street of Odumase, there are about 3 production sites that use recycled glass to make different types of things. So there's my guy who uses my waste glass from Accra to make the beads. If you go down the line, his uncle owns one of the biggest bead production sites. I think that's CD Beads. And then if you go down that same street, we have Tete, I think Mr. Michael Tete. He uses especially Coca-Cola bottles to make vase. And like he's the only glass blower in the whole of West Africa. So I think just being able to put these stories out is good enough for me, but I think the long-term vision is to get to a point where we have like a production plant there where people in, especially Accra, know that if you're able to get your glass to this place, to Odumase Krobo, we have more than 6 or 7 people who are able to, turn these glass waste into beads, which creates employment. Because one of the biggest issues in Odumase Krobo is unemployment. So for me, that's like the dream, like the ultimate dream, yeah.
Right. Let's still stay on that future, the Kor.Le.Kour future. You and I are 80 years old. We are swimming somewhere in Krobo, because we'll put some water in Krobo and swim. But what does the future look like for Kor.Le.Kour, apart from having the production plants there?
For me, the production plant is very big because I think it's a low-hanging fruit to 2 things. One, sustainability, and then employment, like I was saying, because Accra still has waste collection issues, and even the issue with the waste collection is once it's collected, what is it used for? Most places collect the waste and it stays there. Whilst in my case, we collect the waste and we turn it into a product, so it's really circular in that state. And this production one person can do it. It probably takes about 4 to 5 people to run a proper production site, and this is just one small kiln. So for me, the big idea is to have Zoom Lion sized. That's the big idea, because when you have a facility like that, you can really employ people in the community, at the same time be able to push the sustainability agenda. Then we were able to move that forward by having a production team that will be doing the beads, at the same time a team that is making jewelry and other accessories from these recycled glass. Then you start pushing them into the export market, because it will surprise you that when you go to the bead market, we have so many foreigners coming to buy the beads, going to sell outside. Sometimes I go to a certain website and I realize that I can literally pinpoint where the beads are coming from.
Right.
So if I see a lot of pink in their collection, I know that if I go to the bead market, I'll get this shade of pink for probably the next 3 months.
Right. Because they've bought everything out.
They've bought everything out.
Right.
So there's a huge potential, because Krobos have been sustainable for centuries.
Yes.
Now the world is catching up on sustainability and is now turned into a tag line. But we've already had this in production for centuries.
Right.
So for me, the big picture is to make Odomase Krobo the hub for recycled beads. It already is the hub, but to make it more profitable to the indigents as well. Yeah.
Right.
So for me, that's the big wow idea.
Right. Right. Now let's talk about the entrepreneurship journey and how it changes you.
Okay.
Do you recognize any changes that have happened? Do you sometimes feel like you're a different person from when you started on the journey?
Oh yes. For me, I have a beautiful story to tell.
Right.
Primary school, I wasn't a great student. Secondary school, I wasn't a great student. Somehow I got to university, and I was always a great student when it came to my practicals.
Right.
So that means my right brain is really active. I always loved my arts. So with our educational system, you are really timid. You don't talk. I was shy. I couldn't talk. This interview, shout out to anybody watching me who knew me from primary school. I know you don't know. I know you've never heard my voice in primary school, but that is that's the truth.
Right.
Till I started my business, I had never presented in my life.
Right.
I had never presented in a corporate situation. And the funny thing is, literally a year after I left corporate, I was pitching almost every 2 weeks.
Right.
And this is me who had never pitched before.
Right.
My friend, all my friends at work, she's like, when she sees me on TV, she's like, is this the same human being? And for me, it's the growth that has come with it that I love so much about myself. So put the business aside, as an individual, I'm much more better. I'm more articulate. I can process my thoughts. I can move from thoughts to prototype to product to presentation. For me, it's just been a beautiful growth for me. And if you knew me either in my corporate setting or in school, this version of me is totally different from what I was. So it's tough on this side. It's a different ball game on this side, but it's lovely to see yourself grow.
Right.
I can talk. I can do this with you. I can do it on TV. I can do it on radio. I can go for a conference, be called on the spot, and still say what I want or have to say. It's beautiful to me.
Right.
Yeah. So for me, that's my big growth.
So if there's any teacher, there's a parent who has a child who seems to be timid, what's the thing that looking back you feel like this would have been the button that needed to be pressed to unlock the Priscilla that now sits here?
I think this question is to me, so Priscilla, what are you looking out in your kid to make sure that he's a better you, or he knows these things at an earlier age? I'm always watching what he's doing, what he's interested in. Right now, my kid, if I buy him a Lego set, he's building helicopter, aeroplane, truck, and this is within 10 minutes. He's doing it at the same time. So for me, it's carefully watching your child. I think we can't really push it much on the teachers, but I would rather say parents should be more interested in what their kids do as a hobby.
Right.
I actually read an article, I think this week, that stated that make sure that your kids are interested in different things, and if you can afford it, expose them to different sports, different career paths from an earlier age. That's why I was jokingly saying that I hope these gentlemen would make my 4-year-old intern at their studio, because for me those are the things I now look out for. What is he interested in? Have I introduced him to this path of career? Because there's unemployment in Ghana, in Africa. So what can you teach your child from an earlier age to let him understand that you go to school, you get like the degree, you get the PhD, you get the masters, but at the same time you can be so much more, and that extra you do can open a different world to you, different sets of people. So now when people ask me who are your friends, I'm like, I kid you not, everybody who's an entrepreneur in Accra I see as my friend, because the minute we meet, the conversations are sparking, and it's not from literally the same industry, from different industries. So my biggest advice is, if you're a parent, please watch what your kids are interested in. My mom now says that if she knew that I was going to be this when I was cutting my dresses into pieces, she would have probably taken me into like, you know, a creative field, or should have had more patience with me as a child. So for me, those are one of the important things to do. Speaking of creativity, there seems to be this thing where people consider themselves either creatives or entrepreneurs, and struggle to find that sweet spot where the creativity thrives, but as well that they are able to run the business. What has been your journey with this? I struggled with that a lot. Luckily for me, one of my friends from university knows me very well and knows my bubbly creative brain will not survive entrepreneurship. So I actually have a business partner. So I think partnership is one of the biggest things that we should all look into. Being the entrepreneur and the creative at the same time I don't think it will work too well for most people, because sometimes you need to have that analytical eye and be strategic, and that's on your left side of your brain, and your creativity is on the right side of your brain. So if you don't have someone who's always checking you, that okay fine, you like this new design, but do you know how much it's going to cost you to produce this in maybe 500 pieces, 1,000 pieces? So you always need that strategic eye or partner. So for me, the go-to answer to that question is get a business partner. Get a business partner. How do you make business partnerships work? What are the top 3 things you would say? I would say you shouldn't rush it. Okay, and by that you mean? Don't just meet somebody and they, I love your business, it's into sustainability, no, I have a lot of those nowadays. I'm like, no thank you, we are not on the same page, because the business idea sounds fantastic. In the right environment, we'll be making big bank. You might take a business partner who will invest and wants to see his returns tomorrow, and we know how this business is like. COVID, year after COVID, depreciating currency and everything. If you don't have an understanding relationship with your business partner, it wouldn't work. My business partner and I understand that between 2019, fantastic year. Fantastic year. We loved it. 2020, it hit us. 2021, 2022, we are seeing Pepe. But we understand that we are in the long game. So we are able to say, okay, fine, we are not making profit, but let's put money back into the business. He's not pressuring me for like, you know, Charlie, where's the money? That kind of thing. No, it's like, okay, fine, we're not making lots of money, so let's now look for other external business. There's strategy. So you should have a lot of understanding between the two of you as well. Secondly, he should be from a different background. He or she should be from a different background. So if you're a creative, he should be either marketing or strategy or finance, because when you're all from the same background, you're looking at things from the same perspective. So I think one will be, you shouldn't rush it. There should be a lot of trust and understanding, and the other person or other people should be from different career backgrounds and have different experiences in life, or else you guys will be looking at the same thing and probably making the same mistake. Speaking of mistakes,
What's the biggest mistake that you ever made on this entrepreneurial journey?
Okay. Which one do you want? Do you want the one I made when I was, I think, after school? So, like I said, this has always been a hobby for me. So my dad met these investors and they came to the house and they're like, oh, they like my beads. They want to buy some. Oh, they don't have money on them. They took my whole collection. I never saw them again.
Wow.
And this was right after uni because like I said, it's been a hobby for a long time, but I always had stuff. So what that experience at 22 taught me was I don't do credit.
Right.
I don't do that. That it was a bitter experience. I don't do credit.
Right.
So for me, my lessons will be don't trust people on surface level. You know, you're supposed to trust people, but at the end of the day, you have to be a bit cautious when people are people. Not everyone has a good intention towards you or your business, but then always use your for me, personally, my conscience shows me the way. If I have a bad vibe about something you said, about an experience, I won't listen to you. I won't listen to common sense. I'll listen to my conscience. Because I feel that it's telling me something that I can't see or I can't process at the moment. Yeah.
So your sixth sense.
Got it.
Let's talk about policies. We exist in a certain framework. If this conversation was between you and a policymaker, what are some of the things that you really wish you could say about the policies that we have here?
Ghana has amazing SMEs. We have 2019 brought how many people to Ghana? So many. They saw our businesses, they loved our products. We put it on our website, how can they buy? They can't send us Momo.
Right.
So for me, one of the biggest things we should look into now is bridging the gap between the digital interface of a business and international markets.
Right.
Because that logistical bit is just not working for a lot of people.
Right.
It's not working.
Right.
Because you have clients who are able to go to your website, but then when it comes to the payment options, Ghana is not on a lot of those payment options.
Right.
And if you are a Ghanaian like me who's lived all her life here in Ghana, I don't have a financial record in Europe or in the America that can enable me have certain access to certain payments platforms. So for me, that is, as I say here, my biggest concern in terms of policy. We should start looking into fixing our back ends to make it convenient for SMEs to attract more forex, because right now if we can easily pay for our products or we can easily sell our products and we are pushing it rightly on Facebook, on the Instagram, on Google Ads and everything, and you are making a sale of, let's say, minimum $1,000 a day. How much is $1,000 in cedis?
8,000 cedis.
8,000 cedis. 8,000 cedis. How easy would that 8,000 make payments to suppliers, expansions? So we have access to that foreign market, but the back end is too cumbersome. Doesn't make it convenient for the user, and it's literally a nightmare for the producer. So for me, that's one thing we should start looking into.
And why should our leaders care about this?
Because if you want to create employment, you need businesses that are already existent, who have already taken the time out to set up their businesses, not trying to set up, not have a presentation of setting up, already set up their business, business already existing, business already selling outside to a certain extent. Giving them this extra leverage will bring more quote-unquote remittance back into the country and ease the burden of unemployment in the state. Because if I am able to get, in my fantasy world, H&M ordering for waist beads are a very big trend in the States right now. They are ordering waist beads. They want 5,000 pieces. Worst case scenario, 5,000 times $5. Let's say my price for them is
$25,000.
exactly how much is 25,000? times
8.
Thank you. Everything has to be times.
200,000
Exactly.
CDs.
I can pay my guys. I can easily pay my taxes. Momo will not be a problem. Like, you know, certain issues will just dissipate easily. So we being able to sort the back end of these businesses is huge.
How do you take care of yourself mentally? How do you avoid burnout? Have you ever felt like, okay, I have hit rock bottom now? And if you have, what was your way up from there?
I think for me that would be probably last year.
Right.
COVID fatigue plus a toddler fatigue plus business not doing well fatigue pushed me into having an art exhibition. So for me, one of my big outlets is still in my art, but it's more into painting.
Right.
And even in that case, I still use recycled. I still use glass, which I just, you know, upscale a bit and turn into art. So for me, a very therapeutic way of like dealing with being an entrepreneur is my art. I paint. I do stuff with broken glass bottles. I think the exhibition I had this year with one painting, I used about 28 bottles of Guinness Ghana.
That's interesting.
Exactly. So for me, that's a very big outlet for me to be able to still, you know, calm down because it takes a bit of time to finish it. You're able to calm down,
right.
you know, find your balance and then go about your day.
How did you know that, hey, Priscilla, this is rock bottom? Like, how did you know? How does one know? Because I think that there are times when you don't catch yourself before you hit, and so you hit and you crash. And then it becomes a more difficult climb up. But how did you know that this is where we are headed and we need to reset?
I think for me, what made it obvious was I had zero passion to work.
Right.
You know, when you're a step away from depression, you're not lazy,
right,
but you're just out of it.
Right.
You can't sit behind. If you sit behind your desk, you're like,
right.
I don't feel like doing anything.
Right.
The minute you touch it, you're sleepy,
right.
you're irritated. Like every news article you see makes you agitated.
Right.
You know, and for me as a parent, I start losing my patience with my son, which is for me is a no-no. So for me, being able to notice that you don't feel like working, it's not that you're tired though. We'll say the vim is not there,
yeah.
But the vim is not there is probably a day or two. But when it's like a week, a month, and it's stretching, you have to start either seeking help or like, you know, literally seek help. For me, I have a very good mentor, Jamila. So sometimes I talk to her, it's like maybe you should see help, or maybe something like this. Like have someone close that you can talk to,
right.
And as well, we don't like to find our outlets. We don't like to find. Sometimes we don't have the time or the luxury to find our passion and see what we can do to de-stress. So also as an individual, try and find what distresses you. And every now and then when you realize that probably this has gone on for a bit too long, start doing something else to ginger your creativity again. So for me, that was it.
What are some of the sacrifices that you've had to make on this journey? What has been the biggest sacrifice?
For me, like being able to leave that my corporate job,
right?
Because it was sweet, like it's perfect. The type that you have coffee in the office, medical paid, car fuel allowance paid, like a lot of things were, you know, paid for. But would I be the same person I am now if I was in that space? No.
Right.
So for me, that was because slashing your salary into two is literally is unheard of. I'll not advise you to do it, please. It's unheard of. It's a bit extreme, but also at that age, I could do it.
Right.
At that moment in time, I could do it easily because I didn't have any responsibility. So you should also know where you are in life and make certain decisions. But for me, that was one of the big ones. And also changing my lifestyle. You know, you can't go and eat shrimp cocktail, prawns, whatever, every day. You have to be, have I paid my supplier? Have I paid my my social media people? Have I paid the delivery guys. Delivery is so expensive in town now. So like, you always have to be considerate of other people you have to pay over always just, living a certain lavish lifestyle. Money is coming in, but you have to be very careful that you don't create this persona that, oh, I'm on TV so I can live a certain lifestyle. No. You have to do what's important. In tree, we say, exactly. So yeah, for me, that's one of it.
Right. So as part of the Kotoku collection, each of the partner entrepreneurs we are working with on the campaign came up with a one-liner that meant something to them. And yours was, the problem is your attitude towards the problem.
Yes.
What does this mean to you?
It's more like the obstacle is the way.
Right.
Sometimes you see
the obstacle is the way.
Sometimes you're in a situation where you are looking at the long-term implications of the problem, and you're forgetting to live in the moment and find or at least find one solution that day that will move you a step ahead. So if you're always like in your overthinking state, or if you're always overthinking, you will never go into solution mode.
True.
And for me, I would rather probably give myself 15 minutes to be angry about the problem than the rest of the day, how best can I do this?
Right.
Because worrying about the problem is a waste of time. It's a complete waste of time. Finding a solution or finding several solutions will come quicker to you than just sitting in your anger or in your pain or whatever it is. I honestly believe in people in self-development, finding your higher self,
Right.
always stepping ahead of yourself, seeing what you could be instead of what you are. So it's constant. Actually, this line is from Captain Jack Sparrow,
Right.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Right.
So yeah, so for me, it's something I always say. I've probably been saying it since 2014.
Right.
I totally love it.
Right. And I think you've shared some really interesting things. One about the obstacle itself
is the way.
Is the way out.
Yeah.
And also allowing yourself some space to be angry about the problem.
Yes.
But time boxing that allowance.
Yeah.
So we can be angry about the problem, but we
Exactly.
only have 15 minutes to be angry.
Yes.
And the rest of the time we have to solve the problem.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for making time, Priscilla.
It's an honor to be part of this campaign. Like I was saying earlier, you guys are one of the fantastic brands, and I know how much passion you would have to be able to put a campaign like this and invite other entrepreneurs to come and share their stories. So thank you very, very much. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much.
And I love my t-shirt.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.